Good afternoon, Indy fans. It's Friday the 11th of June 2021 and it's time for Boris's Best of British Bulletin, episode 40 with me, DaviePHD. In Scots Unionist news, former Scots Tory branch office MP for Stirling, Stephen Kerr, has made an unwelcome return to politics as a list MSP, and it's fair to say it's nae going well so far. Look at this exchange between Kerr and brand new, fresh out of the box SNP MSP Jim Fairley.
Bodies to reduce meat consumption by 75%. Now, if that's the best you've got, I'm afraid you really don't understand what's going on with the industry. But to pick up his point, the real threat is that if this deal goes through, and it is followed on by all the other surely prepared deals, we should be looking at recommending no meat products go into the menu for our children that have been imported from any of the hormone-injecting intensive feedlot system countries that Westminster are currently falling over themselves to do deals with. And let me just point this out to you. The total value of sales in the public procurement sector is worth £150 million. Now, that's a substantial amount of money, and I get that. And it's one that I will be working with the Scottish Government on to improve even further. Please do, Stephen.
Stephen Kerr.
Thank you. The problem that the SNP have is you're fundamentally a party that is opposed to free trade. Tell me one example of the SNP voting for a free trade deal with anybody in any parliament. Give me one example.
Jim Fairley, and I'll give you a wee bit extra time for the two interventions you've taken.
Thank you. The EU.
Ouch. Ooh, sick burn there, Jim. Despite his apparent lack of talent, Stephen Kerr has been appointed Chief Whip by Dross MP MSP. Now, I did wonder about that, as it's a strange choice, but the answer came to me whilst watching First Minister's questions. Stephen Kerr MSP can knock on a table harder than anyone else in the known universe. Watch this video. Here he is, sitting in the front row with Dross MP MSP.
First Minister.
Seriously, just how hard does one need to hit a desk? Now, I know the Scots Tory branch office want to destroy Holyrood, so that is why they brought Stephen Kerr in. They've proven singularly unable to destroy Holyrood at the ballot box, so King Kong Kerr will destroy it from within, one desk at a time. In other news, Scots Tory branch office MSP Dean Lockhart was fuming after he read this tweet earlier in the week. Promoting Leslie Riddick's latest video column, the tweet read, "Should Scotland be partitioned into yes and no voting areas so that every region gets the result it voted for?" Furious at what he had read on Twitter and attributing it to either the National or Leslie Riddick, Dean Lockhart tweeted, "Even using language such as partition is incredibly divisive and echoes the bitter sectarian conflict we have seen in Northern Ireland. This, at a time when we need to be pulling together to recover from the pandemic, is ridiculous." Now, interestingly enough, Twitter recently brought in a new function that prompts users of the social media platform to read a story before sharing it. Now, if Dean Lockhart had read that story, he would have seen that the idea was not being promoted by the National or Leslie Riddick. It was actually being promoted by a fellow Scots branch office Tory. Scots Tory branch office councillor Andrew Wood sits on the Dumfries and Galloway Council as part of the Scots Tory branch office group. He called for the Scottish border to be moved north and island communities such as Shetland or Orkney to be allowed the choice to break away in the event of a yes vote. Which isn't very unionist, is it? In fact, it's kind of like... sorry, what's the word again? That's it. Partition. The Scots Tory branch office has been asked if Dean Lockhart stands by his comments or if he plans to retract them now that he knows he was actually attacking a Scots Tory branch office colleague. The silence has been deafening. And finally, in UK Unionist news, the G7 is meeting in Cornwall. At this meeting of global leaders, high on the agenda for discussion over the coming days will be the response to the global coronavirus pandemic and climate change. So you can imagine our total lack of surprise that Boris Johnson chose to arrive there on a private jet. In fact, it was our private jet, And just in case you're thinking it was one of those wee Learjet thingies, it was this private jet, a goddamned Airbus A330. In other configurations, this plane can take up to 300 passengers, so you could be forgiven for thinking that this was totally unjustified and a bit tone deaf with the climate emergency so high on the agenda. But as is usual with Boris Johnson, we're all wrong. All 66 million of us are wrong. You see, by the time you get Boris Johnson, his massive ego, his libido, his huge sense of entitlement, and finally his overwhelming sense of self-importance on board, then there wasn't enough room in there to swing a cat. So, clearly justified, folks. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Yeah, with leaders like Boris Johnson leading the charge to save the planet.
Our universe is doomed! Doomed! We're doomed. We're doomed.
Well, that's it for this week. Stay classy, Scotland. DaviePHD.